Hi, Bill.
Hi, Jeff, and welcome to another 999 show talk with Tarot Ask Backwards. And today we're going to talk about that feeling that people have where they felt like they were born into the wrong timeline or the wrong era. Because now it's timeline now. When I was a kid and feeling this way, I felt like I was born in the wrong century. And but I can say that feeling went away someplace between 35 and 45, and I don't feel that anymore. But what I wanted to explore today is this a carryover feeling to like a past life or something? Your past or
Yeah,
what
and I
is?
think a lot of what comes from that too could have to be where did you choose to come into this life now, even though you should have been born into another time frame, or there's that whole astrological bent where things like the later you're born in the zodiac, the more chances there are, Bill, you've had a lot of lives. So why are you in this one now? And
I
I
see.
bet people that have been in that position probably, I'm wondering if in those signs they feel that more, but I pretty much feel like I just shouldn't be here. Period.
Oh,
Sometimes. Yeah.
at
That's a whole
this
different.
time of my life, at this time of my life, I don't feel that at all because I'm like having a great time. I know that when my mom passes on, it's everything's going to change, and I'm hoping that hey, Katniss, and welcome, Twisted. I know
Hi,
that my
Twisted
mom has always
Sushi.
wanted to
Hi,
live to be
Katniss.
100. It was
See, now
Katniss.
that I don't get either, because I know people want to say because they want to do it, they want to live to be 100, but why? you know?
Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because I actually would like I if they had if drugs came available that lengthened my telomeres and I could get another 100 years and my it like a it this level of body function, but if it just would roll back just a little bit to like 48, 45, I would definitely jump on taking drugs, that would give me another century, another 2 centuries, or in because I really love my life. I didn't love
Oh,
my life. I didn't love my life when I was a teenager because I had lots of depression and I almost didn't survive my 20s. I had I went out and I had a suicide plan and but something happened. All these different things happened along the way and it was aborted. So I'm just going to go into some real talk here
okay.
and talk about real things. And that happened. It was after a massive breakup, because I wanted to be married. I wanted to be in, and I wanted that but maybe, because but then anyway, that's another story. Because and that relationship didn't work for whatever reasons. And then, I had, all these things were going wrong. And I was thinking, that's it. I'm just going to cash it in. Well, so I go, I said, oh, well, I need to use a firearm. And I said, my dad has a firearm. And so they weren't home. And so, okay. So I went to go drive home and somehow the car broke down in a nearby city in front of a Catholic church. And then, but not just that, I locked the keys in the car. And so I had some help from the people in the Catholic Church. And then while I was there, I just stayed for mass because it was the Saturday evening and it was like a 5 o'clock mass. And then by the time that mass was over with, that whole sense of wanting to do that vanished.
Yeah, and that's not the only experience you've had though, where it's been almost synchronistic to what you're going through at the time, right?
Yes,
Within the church.
yeah, yeah, within the church. And so that wasn't. but that wasn't actually the reason why I became Catholic but it was more because that went back to that whole sense of when I was a teenager, and I would look at pictures, or I would watch that show In Search Of. I don't know if you remember that, but that with Leonard Nimoy, and and there would be like these regions of the world. It would be like Tibet, or it would be like Pakistan, or the stands, and they would show the living situations of people, and that architecture and all that stuff just seemed so familiar. And then it was, or you go to the few times that I've been to an Orthodox church, that high ritual makes sense to me. The theology does not, but that high ritual does.
I've always wondered too if the deja vus are from another life, because they do look like they're in this life, but I'm wondering if you've experienced them in another timeline that's similar to this one.
I did when I was in Israel. When I went into that, I went into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I went into the Coptic chapel, and I had a massive experience in that place. And it was the same like going in it, but it was like when I watched that show In Search Of when I was a teenager. And it was so otherworldly, and I was transported like into a different realm, in a sense, but not. Maybe it was just all in my imagination. I don't know, but it was that
once you quit something that made life bearable, a lot of the times people that complain about it are told that they're what's the word? They can't handle it, or they're pussies, or they're thinking they're born in the wrong timeline. But really what they were doing was they were burying themselves in some way to have fun, but they really still didn't want to be in this timeline, even after they got sober, or after they, because their personalities just aren't, it was worse or they had someone around them that made life more bearable. And that's kind of the way I feel about it, because it's funny because you call the 9-9 show, and that's almost like right before endings and such. I just kind of feel like it sometimes being born in the wrong timeline means almost to imply that there's one timeline that you belong in, even when we were talking just a second about that synchronistic thing where one timeline on top of another mirrors it.
Well, it might be that, but then maybe multiple timelines within the same timeline, or maybe if we think about these things as like echoes of the past, kind of filtering through, kind of like how I think of what ghosts are. I think that, because it was funny, when I was at the art fair, and I was kind of talking a bit about this with one of my classmates, and his parents, he lost his parents, and he had all his teeth pulled out, and working on getting his dentures and stuff like that. And then he was talking about, but I said, well, you're having these experiences with your ancestors. And I think it was that point I said, well,
were they coming to him? Like visiting?
They were coming to him, but I'm thinking, they may not. They may just be an echo of your grandparents and your parents, and the main bulk of the souls of your parents and grandparents may have actually moved on into other lifetimes already. And you are experiencing, what you're experiencing is you're experiencing the physical manifestation of who they were in your life and in your memory. That's that echoing. And so whether you see a ghost, or you think it manifests as a hummingbird, or it manifests when you go out in the woods and you go hunting and you're there, and then you're with you, then immediately your grandfather is back there with you. Your grandfather is there as you were.
It sounds vibrational.
Yeah.
On some level that you can manifest in a way you don't know. That's what it seems like to me. But yeah.
But when I mentioned that whole thing, that it was like, and then it was like he was kind of shocked when I mentioned reincarnation and all that, because that was like, oh, that's not part of his religious experience, or whether he's religious at all. I think he's tribal. I'm not sure. Yeah, he is. He's got one of those last names that is definitely a one who, and I'm not going to say it, but it's like, but you have that. So it's not part of the Christianization of his cultural expression. The whole notion of past lives and so forth, and so the whole reason why my own Christianity has gone so far astray was that sense of getting introduced to that word when I was like 10 years old, and not being able to shake the truth of it, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it does. But I think too, a lot of the whole timeline thing is really distorted in some sense and manipulated by the billionaire class right now, like the Peter Thiel that wants to advance a transhumanist agenda, so that there can be this medieval feudalism, which is part of that breaking or colliding agendas. And then at the same time, too, you've got the futuristic agenda coming in too, Bill, where you could live theoretically consciousness, as long as your consciousness can live forever. But yet a lot of people think your consciousness already has been, as you point out to me. But to wed the consciousness to using our body parts as fuel, or using us as biofuel, or using us as just like, our parts to make us into robots, that's a conversion of a whole bunch of timelines. So I do think
it is, but Peter Thiel talks about this stuff, but he's not the first person who talked about this stuff. This stuff goes back to as Isaac Asimov, and it goes back to the people who I believe are the prophets of our generation, and not the biblical prophets. The biblical prophets are the prophets of somebody else's generation.
Some feel he's the Antichrist, but
everybody is an Antichrist when you go measure your life up to the Beatitudes. If you just go by a simple Jesus viewpoint, and because Jesus, if you think, oh, get behind me, Satan, and he's talking to his brothers. Well, okay. Well, I think that we're going to do a show about this. We need to, when we look at these ascended masters, we need to pull them out of mythology and pull them out of like fan fiction. And they look at like the first 3 centuries before the church was formed, and you had all these different gospels and this and that, and a lot of people look at that stuff as like fan fiction.
It's all convergent. You have like the Christian evangelicals; they believe in a lot of this stuff too.
Yeah, and so you're looking. Yeah, well, so what you need to do is if you are still you are in that. I mean, because there's nothing wrong with these religious paths in my idea, because I've in a sense of being a religious universalist, is that, there are all these different philosophies, and they all are converging on the same thing. And there's a book that I have. It is all about Christian mysticism. It's written by
That's what I think
a German.
Timeline's out of place for some people that aren't ready for it, because I feel like you're right. I feel like all of that's been converging, and I feel like it's converging to now. But at that point, what is now? Does now go off into something else entirely? That splits into 7 or 8 more different timelines or whatever. It's just interesting.
But there's another way of looking at this, Jeff, is that your timeline is a slight bit different than my timeline. It's a slight bit different than Katniss, than Mama Sushi, and everyone else is kind of on their own sort of a thing. And there are convergences there, but there are some differences, and so you are living your own matrix in your own simulation, and so maybe there's some divergences. I have like people in my life that are old friends that are not, or those paths are diverged because they have their nose to the grindstone, like. Retirement is like a year or so away. When her husband reaches 52, he can retire with full benefits from UPS, and they got the retirement clock on, and they got it measured right down to the second. I got classmates that were in the post office, and they got it right down to the second to when they can finally retire, and all that. And so that's like that it's so close for them. And so all of their time and resources are going to just work and nailing down their resources and then, and all of that stuff. And then they're thinking, well, we can get out of this Bay Area and we can go move to Vermont where we want to go. We want to get out of the West. We want to get someplace else. Mm-hmm. And, but I guess what I'm saying is about that is that where this divergent story is that before they got so close to this retirement age that they could go, my timeline with this friend was more together. It would, because there was more like weekly phone calls and things like that. Now there's like, we're lucky if we can hit up on a phone call like every other month, but because there's of all the heavy amount of work that a person is doing. I
don't know. I think like for me that a gentler sort of world would have been better for me. But when has there been? So I kind of feel like sort of this whole thing is the victimization, thing where people could be like, well, you really need to buck up, Jeff, and, smack yourself around and get your, butt cheeks on.
Well, I know you have some issues, but if I were to prescribe, because I'm very good at prescribing things for people, mine would be it would be for you. It would be going to open mics and doing open mic poetry, and if you could go to slam poetry, it would be even better, because you have in your story that you could probably have something that's in there and then you work on that style of that hip hop style of poetry that they do in that spoken delivery form. And I really, really believe.
So it's performance art. It's more performance art than it is poetry. Maybe I'm in the wrong venue. I believe that you
would be able.
So I'm in the wrong timeline.
You are, but you can jump to this new timeline But you can jump to this new timeline and you can begin new, because that's also, if we were to, I wasn't gonna go to. Hold on, Mom.
Okay.
The news for me. Okay. I'm gonna step away for just a second and turn the TV on for my mom, and I'll be right back. So you can talk to the peeps here.
So when I think of the timeline, you guys, I don't think that for me that any of this is by accident, and I feel like it's a hodgepodge of mishmash. And either you fit into that mishmash, or you're waiting for this mishmash to just fucking, dissipate into the one that is for you. And maybe you were here or put here to go into that timeline. And that could be through nuclear attrition. It could be through the apocalypse. It could be through anything. But I don't believe that we would have been feeling things psychically that we know now are coming true if, as Bill said earlier, we haven't been on multiple timelines at some point, and now we're in the one where it's a little bit the roughest for the more obvious reasons. That's my take on it, where you just kind of point to something and say, well, there were multiple timelines before this evolved into this one. Why? I'm not really a believer in did we choose to incarnate in this time. I don't know where you stand on that, but for me, I don't think it's accidental, given some of the psychic gifts we have and some of the abilities. My thing is, it's like, if we have these abilities and we are supposed to be using them and developing them, and they're underdeveloped, maybe in the timeline we're in, some people would say that we're complaining we're not appreciated enough. I feel like being persecuted is part of being in this timeline. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I would have agreed with you more on that. But maybe as I get older, I'm thinking, like I say, because one of the thoughts that I had is that when I crossed into my between 35 and 40, I felt more rooted in this body. And so, like, really? One of the yes, and so one of the thing, and so I also became more anxious about something happening to this body. So when I lived in Seattle, and I had that one room apartment, that 10 by 15 apartment with the bathroom down the hall, I never slept with the door locked, just in case, but I since had realized that a lot of my anxiety that I had really wasn't anxiety at all. It was just because I had asthma.
Yeah. I think with that, more than anything, if you choose to be born into a timeline where there's lots of war, lots of famine, lots of starvation, things are out of your external control, yet you've chosen it, or are you here because you're supposed to be here because externally you're supposed to feel pain, or you're supposed to go through a gradual an evolution of something into something more? And that means even as spirits, we're meant to be persecuted, even if we're out of the right, if we're not born into the right timeline, or we are, because that evolution between timelines implies suffering. Whether we're human, whether we're not human, we're on this trajectory to suffering on some level.
Well, that's that whole thing of where we need to go into a more mystic version of Christianity. And this is this whole image of why Catholicism made sense to me. The cultural, the iconography, a lot of the things, not necessarily the politics, not a lot of the theology, but there's a lot of the core images and truths that were transmitted through time. And this image here tells me that it is okay to suffer, and there's nothing wrong with you if you do. And whereas if you look at a different,
I like that.
if you look at it, if you look at a different form of Christianity, if you look at like prosperity gospel, you look at these ones where I would actually just come out and say it's
Old and New Testament too. I feel are so
yeah,
different.
I would say, I don't like to use these terms, but I really feel like there are, though I am a religious universalist, yes, but I do think that there are paths that are completely wrong, and they do more harm than good. Ultimately,
are they supposed to be in the timelines though?
they may be supposed to be in there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are. But I guess this is that whole. Then I'm coming into my own hypocrisy, because I have a problem with do-gooders, and now I am being a do-gooder.
I feel like I'm going the other way soon. Like I'm on the cusp of telling a bunch of people to fuck off. Like I feel like I'm going the other way, which is weird. Yeah, because I'm getting more cynical and angry. Yeah. Like today, I was sitting here, and the more I say it, the worse it gets. I fucking hate this. I hate this. I hate this. But I live with someone like that. But I feel like I don't feel like he's a spiritual benefit to me, but he has no spirituality to begin with. So it's like, to me, I feel like the underpinning of all of the suffering through any timeline, there are certain things, Bill, that are there in any timeline. That's always been theology, as you've said, and these are things that the things that bind the things together are the mysticism of each of these periods. Even now, whether it was a darker enlightenment or whether it was medieval or whether it was, a Renaissance or what, all of these things are bound by spirituality. So on some level, there's some salvation in suffering. But I think for us to say if we're in the right timeline, I think it's based on what we've come from, and I feel like the uniting thing about this is how much we've suffered. Because the longer we live, on some level, is with the signs, like they say that Capricorn means you're in your 50s or your 60s. So the next life that you have, you've already had these lifetimes, and you've got more wisdom and more psychic ability or whatever than those other ones. So what I'm trying to say is, I think it's like the wisdom of time through which you're born, not the one time that you're in, is more important than all of it now.
Well, and if I go back to one of those other points of where I was going over and over again about feeling like I was born in the wrong era, is because of how much of a failure I was in the romance department when I was younger, and not being able to read signals, and being kind of bitter about that, and then saying, well, why can't I just have an arranged marriage? Why do I have to like attract you and have to go through all these hoops, and I have to like interpret your signals and all of that stuff? Why do I have to do that? Why can't I go back into the past where they didn't have animals, where the families, what?
We're animals, or are we?
Yeah. There is that.
These constructs are born out of civilization. They're not born out of attraction. And I feel like if you want that scenario of an arranged marriage, which you point out when we were talking about it backstage, that in 50% or 50 or however many, it's still going on. I feel like that will go on forever. And I feel like that's a more valid form of having to be in a timeline where it's about not necessarily vanity, but what grabs looks first and what grabs all that. That I get from the spiritual point of view. Like, people would probably accuse it for, well, you're just afraid of vanity, and you're afraid of pretty people, and you're jealous, and you're afraid of, that. The problem is that we live in a society that puts too much emphasis on that. So I don't know of any other time other than this one. This is sort of the inverse of it, where as much emphasis has been put on that, whereas caste systems, dowries, and other things, you make a valid point, have actually had benefit in all these other timelines. Whereas now I feel that like the predominant energy is vanity. When
it is, and it's also the worship of youth as well.
Yep.
And
more than any other time. More than any other timeline. Would you say? I mean, I would think.
I don't know, because it's, there's something I'm just not going to say, because it's I don't want it to go sideways too much. But if you go read a book by I think his name is Dan Savage, and his column, I think, was syndicated for a while. He used to write an advice column in a Seattle newspaper called The Stranger, and it was like all about sexuality and
too.
Yeah,
didn't he?
And so he wrote a book, and I think it was kind of trying to say that there is no such thing as a traditional marriage. And so this was all around the time of the before marriage equality, before the Supreme Court. What was that? They ruled on that everyone can, that you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be between a marriage between a man and a woman. That marriage can be, if it's coming into that marriage union, it can be, it can be a lot of different ways. And so he was in this book. I don't remember the name. I read it, but it was really fascinating. And that what we think is a traditional marriage is not at all. And then you look at what was a traditional marriage in the frontier days. Well, it was people, they got together, and maybe 1 or 2 years later, when a preacher came through, that's when the ceremony happened. But they got together because they didn't, and they get together in doing these things. And so in the past, it was
the minister was riding through. They say, "Oh, is that where shotgun wedding comes from?"
That may have been, but it was. I think it was more or less that the minister was coming to town, and you're out in the frontier. Welcome back, Mama Sushi, and thank you for hanging here with us, Katniss. And so the idea that you had to have your marriage blessed first by a preacher, well, that's not a traditional marriage at all.
That's true.
But it's things they just change through time. And then, or like every one of my there was one of my cousins, she had a $50,000 destination wedding on the Columbia Gorge that lasted like less than 6 months, where she ran away from her husband. That was like, and then that was like, to me, I thought that was like unheard of. Why are you spending so much money on a wedding? And it's like, gosh, I've been to a lot of weddings that were like, I witnessed one a couple of years ago down at South Beach State Park in Newport, where the folks, they just collected on the beach. Somebody stood up to be the preacher, and then they whipped out the barbecue and started cooking hot dogs and hamburgers right in the park, in a day-use park, and they had a great time. But then what was interesting about it is that they didn't conform to any gender norms when they put this thing on. And so everybody, one partner was in the tuxedo, the man was in a dress, and it was the other way around. And I don't know if it was what was going on, but it was fun to watch this thing. But I watched them roll it out, and then they did all that, and I'm thinking, and then my mind, because I think about money often, because it's like it's like always the economics of something is always on there.
Yeah,
And
that's another problem with it, the timeline right now.
yeah.
It's too much that way. Yeah.
And so I was calculating how much money did they spend, and I almost went up and asked, because I was like thinking, I bet they did this whole wedding for under $2,000. And I've been to weddings like that, and I've had the greatest time of all was going to these weddings that I knew that they, you show up to the reception and it's potluck, but it's not really potluck. It's that their family cooked all the food, and you had I know it would be nice. It would be nice not to ask. I didn't ask because I had the consideration not to ask, but I wanted to ask. I really, really wanted to ask how much they spent on their wedding, and rather than whatever. It's like, but yeah, but that's just me. Because sometimes I that's what I think about. How much does that cost? But when you talk about a traditional marriage and what is that, and you go track back through time and you look at history and you realize that there's no such thing as a traditional marriage. And the most traditional marriage that we have is that arranged marriage. That's the most traditional marriage that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the constructs of a civilization at any given time that you're in, I wonder if there are people for whom ending their life in that timeline is what they're meant to do, because they are out of place. And that was the will, that was the picture. If this is Nintendo to God or whatever, or this is one painting, one piece of a whole pie, they're supposed to not be here, but they were supposed to come for a brief time. And I feel like even if they died accidentally, or if suicide was an accident, it was an accident, and it was not sin, and it was not things where people, and then, but if you cast that sort of, you cast that in that kind of light, you're considered an apostate, or you're considered sinful, or you're considered, and I feel like it's the external versus the internal, and every time it's that war between what can be spiritual and what can be just external.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're being pushed in every timeline, Bill, back, and then two, and then back. Yeah. So.
Well, and then the other thing that kind of prompted this having this discussion at all was when I was watching. I haven't gone back to watch some more of the episode, but I watched the entire season 7 of Alone from the History Channel, and which was my favorite season of all, where it was the guy from Alaska who won the 100-day challenge, and he talked at length about feeling like he was born in the wrong timeline, and that everything about living in a stone house that he built out in the wilderness, to bow hunting, to tanning hides, and to doing all of that stuff, that made sense to him. But living in the world where he had to drive a car, where he had to manage his bank account, where he had to get a wife, but he never did get a wife because that was something that he couldn't do that either. And because for whatever reason, because I don't think he did. If he did, it'd been when he was in his late teenage years. But he also wanted to get out. He wanted to get out. I think he grew up in New England area too, or someplace like that. Maybe it was Maine. It was someplace like that, where when he was like 16, he got out. He got out and moved to Alaska, and and to do things. But that sense of, in his own timeline, he went back. Yeah, that's a good show. And in his timeline, he just forced his own timeline to go back, to go live in the ways that he wanted to live. And so he made that. And so when and just a little bit of a different thing, we talked about being able to jump timelines. Mm-hmm. And I think you can jump timeline, because in a sense that where part of that,
I'm wondering if
Jesus,
the braver, not to interrupt you, but the braver among us, are the ones who are born braver, are the timeline shifters, or the iconoclasts, or the people who are meant to set up the timelines that would defy expectation in other lives, and maybe it's not always for the better. Maybe there's a reason for those possessed by Satan to continue to do what they do and push the boundaries and the envelopes, just as there are the other way for the good. So
is that something that you believe in, as demons and Satan's? Because I don't think that I don't think that stuff exists at all.
No, you don't.
No, okay. I don't. I don't, that's because
big discussion in these areas. Yeah, that's a big discussion.
Yeah, and see, because what I do think is that these hands are God's hands, and these hands are the devil's hands, and those spirits are all, they're all us.
Wow. Okay.
It's all us, because it's like we can do the will of God. And because we don't need, and it's also that part of my Christianity, which is heretical, is we do not need an intermediator in order to connect up with God. And so it's all this free will. So you are, and so I don't know, maybe there are these spiritual forces out there. But I think maybe what that is it's the embodiment of fear.
And what's interesting is the reason I pulled this out for a second is it made me think of this card. It's ingenuity, and it's I think the magician. Yeah, but he looks like the devil, and he's kind of embodying what I think of that, what we just talked about, where I believe demons. And there's another card too where I just had to pull these out, where it's pulling back and forth in someone's head. But I feel just as there can be ghosts, Bill, I mean, if they're not demons, are we conjuring demons in our own mind then? I mean, on one hand,
Okay. I think it's that it's the same thing as like when I think about these apocalyptic energies, which I think that these are energies that we create ourselves. We ourselves manifest them. I think that if we go beyond Earth plane, all this stuff doesn't exist. It's like a sub program, and so when we go beyond this place, it all goes away. All the mythologies, all this stuff does not exist anyplace else from here, because there are other realms, there are other planets, and they have their own stuff. And so when we go, and I don't know how much of it carries over, but maybe when we come back in here, all of this stuff comes back. But the religions, whether it be Hinduism, Buddhism, paganism, whatever, it only exists on this planet only. And so
maybe
it does not exist anywhere else. And so that's what my
material. You mean materially, it couldn't exist anywhere else? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. Maybe something like that. But these other entities, or more, what Amanda says is, I think there are other entities, like who knows how many astral realms there are. Yes, and so there may be some carryover from other places. So what we have is these echoes And that's what I kind of like calling it. I'm calling ghosts echoes of something that was before. Like it's echoing through this timeline. Or like if we think of this sense of this generational dysphoria, that past timeline is echoing into yours. And so it's like my desires for an arranged marriage, or if I just go look at these other things of seeing or like experiencing a Russian Orthodox church service, and you have all of that performative ritualistic worship or whatever it is. All of that stuff makes sense to me because it's something that is echoing through time, but then we are manifesting this stuff, completely remanifesting it through time. And so if you are a person who wants to know how the early church worshiped, well, you just go to an Orthodox service. You go see, because they really work on binding themselves to tradition. And you go into an Orthodox church service and everybody's singing a cappella. There are no musical instruments in there. There are no pews in there. There are some benches around the perimeter for the elderly people to sit down on, for people who are elderly. But for everyone else, you stand. Maybe you kneel on the floor, but you stand. And this is the way it was. And if you look, they looked at when they uncovered these ancient synagogues.
They these people falling down in church and all that. Do you think that's real? Do you think they're crossing timelines by doing that and transcending something into something better, like momentarily?
I think they're having a body experience. And the same way, if you go to a rock concert and everyone's energy is focused on that band, and there is a body experience that you have, it pushes those buttons of your dopamine and your serotonin, and you're having an experience, and it's in that moment. And you go to church and you go to a worship service and you have a body experience, and whether that is and then depending on the how much tradition there is that they are adhering to, those echoes of the past are those echoes of how things were done in the past.
It's almost like they have a recollection of something better. So I'm wondering if those same people coming kind of full circle are the ones who were born into the wrong timeline, even though they're exalted and they have all this spiritual ability and they're happier maybe than some of us, but they could still be in the wrong timeline. But they're not depressed, they're hopeful. Yeah.
Well, maybe this sense of they're not born in the wrong timeline. I guess maybe what I'm trying to get here is that they are born in the right timeline. It's just that the memory of the last one is still present, and it's way down deep. Mm-hmm. And so it's a sense that there's a disconnect there, because I think we look at that, and I know you don't agree with the whole Earth as a playground kind of a thing, and I know because you don't like it because it means that somewhere somebody chose to go on a amusement park ride. Yeah. And why would you choose? But have you ever been have you ever gone to an amusement park and maybe you chose to
I was like 6.
you chose to go into a box and feel free fall.
Yeah. Have you done? I bet you've done it. Yeah.
I have. Welcome, Desiree. Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah. That's another thing too. Yeah.
I mean, I know that you don't have to agree with me. I don't have to, but that makes this show better if you don't don't agree with me, but I'm not trying to win you over.
Well, I'm
But
not trying to be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian.
yeah,
I'm wondering if sometimes it's almost like saying the people that are the happiest can still be exalted in this lifetime, but not be here or not be fully here. And maybe that's why things resonate more and they vibrate more through that experience of deja vu or ghost like. So, on some level, maybe they're here more for others. And actually, on a more positive note, maybe they're here for others. And even if they don't want to be here, they're actually doing greater good by being here now when they don't want to be.
yeah. Well, then if you're here for others, then you are learning out. You are working on, because okay. And this is where I am now diving into Christian heresy. Is that this is not necessarily true, but this is Christian heresy: is that you are saved by works alone,
Mm-hmm.
and you are saved by how you come into this alignment here. You come into this ascended form by you come into this form through the act of love, because love is an action. It's not a feeling. It's an action. It's something that you do. And so you, with the people in your household that you are helping take care of each other, you are loving through action. Now, you may not like it at times. Maybe you feel bound to this person.
Mm-hmm. Or stuck.
Or stuck, yes. But this is a sense of one of those ways, because it's like, okay, you have whatever you do to the least of these people, you do to me. So if you are not feeding the poor, if you are not taking care of the sick, if you are not visiting people who are in prison, if you are not doing these things, you are doing that to God. And that's kind of the Jesus message. And so that's that message. And so you are, because it's the sense that these hands are God's hands, your hands are God's hands, and you are acting and you are doing whatever you are doing, the work of God. But it's not God in a sense of it's not, I don't know that this is necessarily a personal God. I don't know about that. It may be more like that Hindu version, because you have the what?
Vishnu, or what's it called? The elephant there.
Actually, it's the over God. The over God was just the Brahma, and then there are all these.
Brahma. That's it. Yeah.
The Brahma, and then there are all these under gods that kind of help to all the other little stories that help to tell the bigger story. And so you have the Brahma story, and this one, when I had heard it, I think I heard it told through the Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell, another one of my those heroes, those mythological heroes who helped to form these ideas, form these ideas. And I'm just going to tell the story as it is on the Power of Myth as I remember it.
Okay.
Because so the Brahma comes down, and he creates the earth, and he creates the stars, and he creates everything, and he creates the trees, and he creates the grasses and the birds and everything. And then the Brahma comes and realizes, I am that tree. I am that bird. I am that fish. I am that rock. I am that star. I am that man and woman. I am everything. And that's that sense of these hands are God's hands.
So you can never be born into the wrong timeline?
I think that's true. What you can be, my thesis on this, or whatever is that you can feel like you are born in the wrong timeline because you have the memories of the last one. You may not consciously be aware of these memories, but there are these different things that trigger all of that. So you get triggered, like for me, it was watching, being a kid and watching In Search Of, narrated by Leonard Nimoy, and he's going into the Pakistans, or they're going into all these places, and you've seen this old art, and which is, it's this art. It's this iconographic art for me, because if you were to look around my bedroom where I'm at, you would see I have a lot of icons in here, and I love that art, and because it tells stories, but it also just has that feel of familiarity to me.
So what I think we can agree on tonight, and actually it's more you persuading me, because your arguments I think were actually better, is that it's not about better or worse. It's about, or thinking that you shouldn't have been born in this timeline, or you weren't meant to. It's not about that. It's about this isn't really an accident, and the rings from the other times actually have resonance in a different way, realizing that you were born and meant to be here. What I wonder though too is people more directly wonder, and this is true too, we choose our family. People say we choose our family, or were we born into the wrong family? We should have been born to an aristocratic family, or we should have been born into this type of family, or if I were born into the, so there's almost that microcosm of, like, they talk about this in astrology too, where, if in a different life you had something that you don't have now, it's, karmic or whatever. But you convinced me on the timeline front, because I think your arguments actually make a counter argument for everything I said very well. So I feel like, not just with the love bit, the action versus the feeling. The feeling isn't really about being passive or active, though. The feeling is more about the action is more about something you just do by will. And I want to say, if I'm hearing you correctly, that when it comes through and it's coming through, it may not be God, but would you call it source? Would you call it something greater than you?
Yeah, I think there's you have like there is this source. I guess that's the best word for it. But I think of, like, in terms of, like, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It's like the Einstein version of it. But does that energy have intelligence? But it forms into things. You have the energy is hot, and then it cools down, and then it becomes different things. It becomes hydrogen. It becomes these elements, and it becomes things. And so if I were to look at the last time when I was trying to write a novel, and I did, it didn't happen. And because I moved on for that, and I moved on into the painter's paintbrush, and I moved on into this wonderful world of YouTube, which I like even better, and that I can better express myself as an artist. But I was kind of working on creating the world I was writing a novel, and I started that novel when I was like 18 years old, and the timeline stories was combining Tolkien, Raymond E. Feast, and like Star Trek together, combining elves and Star Trek together. But I was in there creating a whole new world. But then I was like going in there and creating this backstory about the creation of the universe. And so I had all these visions coming into my head while I was imagining all this, and I'm thinking, oh, we directed it. So it was that there's evolution, yes, but that evolution was sort of directed. So I guess I would have to say that I am a creationist, and I always have been, but I don't necessarily, I'm not a creationist in a very strict form sort of way. But that it was that sense of the Brahma story, and then the whim. There's the direction, so that there's all these beings, that these entities that so you have a source that divided into different entities, and these different entities are having are out there in a new universe, creating
It almost
stars,
like
and
with each lifetime, it's an evolution.
yeah. Or so they're writing the program. They're writing the
Is that what
so
we're
it's like
doing each lifetime? Writing the
yeah, but
program?
maybe on this is where I get that whole amusement park thing coming from, is that on the backside of it, there are the beings that are writing and creating and actively creating the universe. And the manifestation of that comes in the form of primates becoming this and that, and it comes in the form of dinosaurs becoming birds. It becomes in the form of, so you have the
natural selection fits into that, Darwin.
Oh, I would think totally it would, because it would be a matter of like a little bit of like a hands-off kind of thing. Okay, we did this thing, and then we're going to take a step back and see what happens, and then we go, well, let's tweak it a little bit. See, because it's the same as that whole ancient alien theory, which is a little bit more active.
I was going to say, the ancient alien thing. I'm wondering if they're pulling the strings. Now, it's conspiratorial, but I wonder if creation or source are the ones that do all the DNA, what do you call it? Exhuming DNA from dead people, or pulling DNA and having done experiments is part of that evolution. And that's
I know. I mean, yeah.
And how many different timelines were they involved in? For us.
Yeah, and the thing is I love the ancient alien theory, but I kind of put it on the same par. I put it on the same par as a Marvel comic book. I put it on the same par as a DC comic book. I put it on the same par as any science fiction story that has ever come out, and I also put it on the same par as scripture, because I see all of those things as expressions, and none of it. And this is where I also got into trouble when I was studying theology in a more Christian school, is that I came in without the inerrancy of scripture, because that whole notion of scripture being without error was an alien concept to me. and I could not adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what sat at the heart of all this was these holy books or whatever were all written by mystics. And they were probably either poets and writers, creative people, and mystics who were trying to describe something that they felt. And so it was not anything that was like written by the finger of God. But it was written by the finger of the God in a sense of the whole Brahma kind of a story.
Yeah.
It was written by the finger of God in that sense, and it was inspired that sense. But beyond that, these stories that we have are really not much different than, I don't know, that's my take on it. And that is also why, in one sense, why the pet professors had said they'd never really seen anybody that was they never had anybody who was so creative. Whether I was studying physics and expressing that, or whether I was studying, going into the Bible thing and then pulling in ancient alien theory and these other things, and some professors saying, "Oh, well, you can't do that because they have no credibility," and then being in a place where I took your own credibility and it says you don't have credibility either. essentially that, or having like I had this war with an anthropology archaeology professor, and it got to the point that after I had graduated from college, when he saw me on Yeah, welcome, Elizabeth. And when he saw me on the street, he would walk onto the other side of the street because he did not want to face me again, because I was really brutal to him. And the reason I was brutal to him was because, and this was a story came to me, and I'm sorry, I'm dominating here, but is that his grader wanted to give me a really high mark on a paper, and the professor says, "No, that guy's stupid." And because his test scores were C-, give him a C on that paper. And that story came to me, and then I went on the attack, and I took more classes from him, and I was went in and went contrarian on him. And then so when he was like talking about this and that and that, and so I was just calling it his knowledge a bunch of bullshit, and then working on trying to prove that his knowledge was a bunch of bullshit. And that was me. And but that's just a side story about where that was probably like the only time that wasn't probably not the only time that my hands became the devil's hands. But I don't know if that was even kind of a relevant thing, but you know what I'm saying? It's like that was when I was younger, when I was younger and I was in my intellectual peak, and that was my own disrespect of the traditions.
The people that think they're born in the wrong timelines want to commit more heinous acts or want to have more of an impact, and they can't feel like they can. Where it's that whole action versus feeling thing, and the feeling overtakes them. That's why they end their life, or that's why they get saved, because they want to be saved. And that's like, to me, almost still the tug of war of what I was telling about, where there's one part of this that I won't say it's good and evil, but I would say there's this metaphysical tug based on the things that we've discussed tonight that are not rooted in apocalyptical thought or good and evil, which you've given me a metaphysical and a scientific argument for, that I think is lost on a lot of people in this community, because it's either good and evil, or good versus evil, or it's like there's no the in between is something peaceful, and the in between is a feeling that you get in like meditation. Whereas what you're saying is that feeling is more not just metaphysical, but even beyond the metaphysical. It's something that you're meant to do through the hand of Source. If I'm hearing you right.
I think that's kind of what that's what has come to my mind, is that Thanksgiving is going to happen, and I'm going over to my sister's place, even though I'm not quite ready to do that, but I'm going to my sister's place. My mom wants to do that. And so I'm not doing anything for Thanksgiving. And if I was doing anything for Thanksgiving, it would be a really stripped down meal of like tacos. and nothing, and which is what I'm having for dinner tonight, is tacos. But nevertheless, but that's just so it's not your favorite holiday, yeah. And Desiree, my favorite holiday is all the ones where there's no expectations for you to spend any money on anyone else. It kind of goes back to the economics, but no, I guess I got sidetracked, and so we're kind of looking at that. I guess I got sidetracked here. Love as action. And there is this other thing of I don't know. I'm sorry, where I don't know where I was at. That's where my body's failing me.
Yeah, I had said something about the action and the feeling again, about if you come in and you feel like you're in the wrong timeline, it's because you don't feel effective enough, maybe personally, or maybe you don't see anything other than what Source has endowed you with, and maybe the metaphysical or the spiritual, the psychic gifts that you do have, you are drawing from through things like deja vu, things before. But I'm wondering if the people that want to sometimes exit this timeline aren't meant for it. I think we're coming full circle almost.
We are circling around. Yeah. And that, so if we have a choice on whether we come here or not, whether this is the 1000th time or it's the very first time, you may have that feeling like, like you might have those feelings, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, because ultimately, what we're doing here, Jeff, is we're entertaining ourselves, and we're creating our own fan fiction for whatever is going on, and and I'm hoping that you had a good time, and I'm hoping that everyone else has had a good time. And it looks like we could probably talk about this on another day too, because I'm getting up up towards But yeah, I guess I completely whether that. I guess as I get older, I would say I think we are where we're supposed to be. And we are where we're supposed to be, and then but some people's experience is
something more accidental than that. Some people think it's we are what we are. We're just supposed to be here. I mean, because what you're describing sounds more utilitarian and more impactful, but the arguments and the underpinnings are the same either way. So I don't disagree with it, but I question the outcome. I question, and if there's supposed to be an outcome, you're supposed to have been here at a certain time, you know.
Yeah, I guess I go to this Next Level Soul episode, and it was one of his early ones. It was before when the guy was down, was under 100,000 subs. And the guy he had interviewing was a person, I think his name was Christian, and he was having a pre-birth memory, and he talked about his pre-birth memories of his first times coming into Earth realm. And the way he described it is like that the other realm was like a spaceport or something like that. And you had all these technicians that had to tune your soul so that it would tune down, and then the process of being tuned down to a low vibration. So you're going from higher dimensional space down into lower dimensional space, that it was an extremely painful process to go through. And so maybe that's why
it's denser, right?
And maybe that's why when I had tried to take a MRI test in a closed tube a year ago, that I had a panic attack before I got in 5 seconds. And is that experience is being closed down and having to be tuned down again in order to come here. And then the idea, like what yesterday when I was like on the phone, and I'm thinking I have to get a follow-up MRI, and then the open MRI tube, what open MRI thing was gone. And I'm thinking, where's I can't, and then I don't want to go into the closed tube, and then so we'll give you drugs, and I thought I don't want to go into the closed tube, and it may just be that was an echo. It was a memory of having to be tuned down in order to come here.
Or maybe it was a memory of being put in an incinerator.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but I had that thought came into my head as well. But or something,
or something like,
or like. Or I was actually thinking, I wasn't thinking of like that. I was thinking more like, having been a coal miner or something like that, and the thing caving in on you. But it could be easily this other thing of this is where I'm going back into that whole advanced civilization thing. Because when I went down this path a couple years ago of advanced civilization, and that the whole heavenly realms, everything that we call that was all another civilization. A whole and so it's the whole thing of Isaac Asimov in The Last Question, and feeling like, I'm coming back to the whole thing of where I believe that these authors are the prophets of our generation, not Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is just taking from these other things, and so what Peter Thiel is that, and you're looking at like Isaac Asimov, and you're looking at you're looking at Gene Roddenberry, and you're looking at the Borg. Yeah, but Gene Roddenberry never came up with the Borg, or you're looking at these cyborgs, but you're looking at, let's say, Blade Runner, and you have the androids, and you have all of these other things. All these themes all these things were out there, and they came out of science fiction, and now they're becoming reality. And so Peter Thiel is running with one of those narratives and working to make it reality. And whether he will succeed or not is a different story. But I think that, I don't know. So you have this whole advanced civilization, and we are citizens of that advanced civilization, and we are coming here in either to have an experience. And what that pre-birth memory that guy had is that he had this sense of, he saw this individual who he knew, and they were glowing in ways that he could not comprehend. And then they wondered, how did that happen? He said, well, I came to Earth realm, and I was born into the body of like a paraplegic or something like that, or I was born into the body of somebody who was Down syndrome, or I was born into this, and then I had all these wonderful experiences, and I came out, and now this is me. And so the sense of going into this difficult situation is something that means that you experience something that has benefit on the other side, on your real job as this technician who is maintaining a star in the Altera 1 place, where they got that planet, the forbidden planet thing going on. And what I'm just using that is what I'm saying is that you have you have another job, and you have this other job, and you are doing this other job, or you look at the Matrix, and you are a piece of software in a larger system, and you have this other program that this is where I'm going at. And so this is that whole amusement part. There's the whole Earth amusement part thing that you don't like, and I understand. But that's my rationale. And anyways.
Well, as someone said, I don't know who it was, I am burnt out. I'm exhausted. But this was actually one of my two faves of the 4 or 5 we've done. So yeah. Every week we get better, I think. So
well, we are going to get better, and then if I can figure out that whole viewpoint thing on this thing, I need to figure that out. I know that Elizabeth has it figured out, how we can get it so I can change that orientation, so that instead of us in this skinny thing side by side, we're kind of like this, so it looked better on the phone. And then maybe we can say, hey, Twisted Sushi or Mama Sushi, if you have an idea that you'd like to come in, you can come into our chat here, and you can have an open thing, because that's something that that the more intuitive me does. And she invited me into one of her chat just the other day, and I was there. I met Desiree and Princess Lucy, and I had just a blast for the few minutes that.
Did you fall asleep?
No, I gotta, Mom. I'll be right there with dinner.
What kind of coat do you have on?
It's a jacket. Anyways, yeah, just shut the door. Anyways, I guess it's time for me to start making dinner.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my mom. That was my mother, and she's just getting to be about 6 o'clock here, and she's getting a little impatient. And the dog is actually getting even more impatient because goes around looking at the food bowl and there's nothing in it. Yeah, you understand? Yeah,
I do.
You got those two beautiful dogs, and
yeah.
yeah. I guess we talked. Annie, I talked a lot more than I was thinking we would, but this was great. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming into the chat and hanging out with me, for Desiree, for Katniss, for Mama Sushi, for Princess Lucy, for the More Intuitive Me, for Tenray came in.
Yeah.
And who else did we get here? We had go back through the chat. Well, I know it's late for you because you're 3 hours advanced, and you didn't wake up at 2:00 in the afternoon like I did.
No, I woke up too early today. I woke up around 4:30.
Oh, you're like a morning person. You're like one of those morning people.
I am, yeah, and then I get crankier through the day. So
yeah,
it used to be that way. It used to be the other way. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, really, what happened is because I'm employing this new microphone, and it's not new. I bought it 2 years ago, and it's working. I'm hoping. And
yes, twisted sushi. Yeah.
It's like a lion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Desiree, and we'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about something else because next week comes into Advent, and so. Like Jeff and I are kind of, well, I'm a Christian heretic. I mean, that's what I am, and I'm speaking out of my own heresies, which I believe is my truth. But it's what makes sense to me, and I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. I know that I want to talk about that dark enlightenment thing, and because there's a part of me that's thinking that. There's a part of me that thinks, yeah, that we want to talk about his perspective, which you studied, and you're going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it may be more positive than what it is. I have a feeling that it's not as that these things, even that Peter, the whole transhumanism thing, that stuff may actually be more positive than we think of it is, because we're thinking of the whole evolution.
Did you
thing.
See the interview though, where they asked Peter Thiel if he wanted humanity to go on, and he's like,
"Yeah, I think something like that." But
he glitches out. He's like,
"Yeah, well, you know what? I don't really spend too much time listening to those people, but because it goes back to my my own basic disrespect of people in authority. Because I told that story, I mentioned how I disrespected these scholars because I pulled in the ancient alien theory into things, and they didn't like it because they felt like I was disrespecting the serious scholarship, and where I came from is I literally was disrespecting them, and by entertaining other ideas. And so, and where I've gotten into trouble with bosses is because I treated them like peers, and they didn't like being treated like peers.
No, they don't.
But the reason I treat them like peers is because they ain't the CEO.
Well, that's kind of what Curtis Yarvin says. Every overlord or king is a corporate overlord, is a boss of a certain area or a certain domain. Well, it was about High Owl. It was about being out of the wrong timeline, or not feeling like you're out of place. But now, as we wrap up, we're talking about the transhumanism agenda that Peter Thiel has to turn you into a Borg, and then turn us all into Borgs, and especially older people, and take our body parts, right, and fuse them to consciousness so that we live forever, but we're not ourselves. Our essence is there and we can live forever, but we're cyborgs. It's
dark enlightenment. So we're gonna talk about that coming up soon. Maybe we'll introduce it next week a little bit more, and maybe I need to go in and reread that short story by Isaac Asimov, The Last Question, which is kind of all about this stuff, written in like the 1950s in a sense. And so essentially, Owl, is that I come from coming from a premise that the prophets of our generation are all like are authors or writers, like we come like Jules Verne and you and these different people, and then but it's not just that those are the people who speak to our generation.
Well, I gotta go. I'm losing connection here.
All right, we're gonna end, and we'll be back next Thursday at the regular, maybe like 4:30. I think we'll do it like we'll start at 4:30. And that way I can get my dinner ready and not get in trouble. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. And we'll see you next week. And happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.